All right. We are now recording.
Excellent. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and kick off. I am sure that more people will join us as we progress through the hour, but thank you so much for coming. As always, we do record our biotechnical advocacy lab sessions, so folks can come back and review them later. And our many colleagues and friends who were unable to join today can review this later on. So just wanted to extend a special welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us for this session. I do have a few folks from one of our internal working teams who have joined today. So special welcome to you all. And just wanted to share this programming with you. This is something we offer every month to really support capacity building for our state associations, as well as our wonderful patient advocacy and caregiver advocacy community. So thanks so much. Samson agrees, and I will turn it over to Barrett for the official welcome.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. And hi, everyone. My name is Barrett Stratford. I'm the Director of External Relations for BIO. So I work closely with our Alliance Development team and with our Council of State Bioscience Associations. So I'd like to welcome Beekeeper. They're leading the call today. The topic will be a message that aims to influence. So we are going to discuss advocacy and how the right message leads us to better communicate our ask. So today's speaker will be Natalia Gonzalez. She's an account manager at Beekeeper Group. She's experienced in both traditional and digital communications, particularly in building and supporting grassroots and grass top campaigns. Prior to joining the Hive, Natalia worked at Better Medicare Alliance as a communications associate. So with that, Natalia, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Barrett.
Sure.
Hi, everybody. I am really excited to talk about a message that aims to influence. And before starting, I just want to acknowledge that we've moved into Zoom for all of you who have joined us in the past. So I want to make this as engaging and interactive as possible. We encourage asking questions and use the chat and comments to jump in if you have any questions. So with that said, first I'm going to start with the outline of what we're going to talk today. First, I want to quickly recap on some past webinars for you all who have joined in the past. And also, as Michelle was saying, we have recordings if you want to kind of tie the conversation with some of the past webinars. We'll talk about the meaning of advocacy, how to prepare to get your message out there, the advocacy ask, the delivery of your advocacy message, how important your advocates are to your advocacy message, and then wrap up with the importance of a thank you and the power it has. So first, things we've covered. We've covered grassroots data where we talked about the importance of having a list of advocates, but also how harnessing that list and keeping it up to date is important, how to use that data from past communications with your advocates to get them to be more involved. We also talked about digital messaging and how simplicity makes a difference and repetition is important. And really how to tailor your message to a digital world. We also touched on persona mapping, which I can talk about how that works within your advocacy message, but how important persona mapping is when you are talking about kind of what platforms you're drafting for and how different your calls to action have to be depending on the platform. So we are all familiar with advocacy, so I won't go into the literal meaning of advocacy as much. I'm certain all of us have advocated for something at one point in our life or have joined a group of people advocating for something. But to make it a little more formal, what do we really mean when we talk about advocacy? There's three types of main advocacy that I want to talk about before going into actually the message. So first, there's self-advocacy, which refers to an individual's ability to effectively communicate, convey, and negotiate his or her own interests, desire, needs, and rights. And then we go into individual advocacy, which is a person or a group that concentrate on one effort, on one issue. And individual advocacy is divided into two groups, informal and formal. Informal individual advocacy is when you have a family member or friends advocating for an issue that matters to somebody or affects somebody that they love. And then you have the more formal way of individual advocacy, which is an organization that is created and focused on one specific issue. And it either has a group of advocates that helps them advocate for this issue. Or it could be an individual. And then you have system advocacy, which is about changing the policy, laws, or rules. Often we have we have to keep the advocacy going and then activate for specific policies, laws, or rules. So system advocacy actually applies to self and individual advocacy, but this is specifically when there is a change. So that can be at a state, a local, or a national level. So here are some of the traditional advocacy tactics, the most common and successful tactics for years. But these tactics are also time-consuming and a little bit more expensive, but I still want to talk about them. Those are phone calls, emails, letters, petitions, joining a Hill Day, actually traveling to the Hill or a state capital to advocate, meeting legislators in person, and voting. So this is what we've known for years and decades for advocacy. But now advocacy is more accessible than ever before. There's more inclusive advocacy for everybody, and there's more access for advocates to join their efforts. Obviously, due to 2020's crazy year, we've seen more and more influence from these tactics that were around for maybe the last decade, but really became the only way to advocate. So that is social media, virtual meeting with legislators, sending a video message with your story, creating an online community where people can talk about an issue and really encourage themselves to advocate, texting campaigns, and virtual trainings. So these tactics are less time-consuming and expensive, and you can literally do them in like this photo here with your dog in the couch with your computer or phone. So we've definitely seen a shift in that. If you have seen some of this shift, or maybe a particular tactic that has worked for you, I would love to hear about it and how kind of 2020 has given you guys new opportunities to advocate. So if you want to send that over in the chat, we'd love to hear that. So before we start tweeting away, we will have some work to do. Usually we have a mission or a goal drafted, which is what we want to accomplish, but it's not that easy. Messages need to be tailored to the different platforms that we are talking about. So let's talk about ways that we should prepare and how we can prepare to start spreading your advocacy message. First, you have to identify your tools. So how do we communicate our message? The first thing you do is you audit your channels. So which channels are you on? Are you on Twitter? Are you on Facebook? Are you on LinkedIn? Do you have an email list? Do you have an email platform? And then also think through, how active are my channels? Do I have a Twitter page, but it has 10 followers? Is it worth investing my time to actually go on Twitter if nobody's kind of reading or hearing my message? Is this your opportunity to start maybe a followers campaign to get people to Twitter? Is it worth it? So start assessing all your channels or your tools and think through what the right tactic is. This is important to start writing your message. So it is important because each platform has different requirements. So Facebook allows over 63,000 characters in a post, but Twitter only allows 280 characters in a tweet. So we need to make sure that we understand the different goals and how we message those depending on the platform. I also want to talk about new opportunities. Make sure that this space, the digital advocacy space, it's changing constantly. So one of my favorite examples of new opportunities is TikTok. At the height of the pandemic, people were looking at this app, downloading this app, sharing this app, and it was mostly teenagers, and then it moved into millennials doing dances, maybe singing, and then it became a huge space to advertise, and for some organizations to advocate, to use this as an advocacy tool. And so many issues have been able to get eyes on their issues through this new audience and this highly engaged platform. So always think through, apart from what you have already, where can I expand? Where does it make sense for me to really put my message out there? That doesn't mean every issue will use every platform. So you really have to make sure that you take this time to really identify which tools for which issues. Then we need to create materials, the materials that go along with the message. This will create the thumb-stopping content you need. What is a messaging document? So this is a very simple way of putting your information into a document that you can share around with your team or even your advocates. It's a document that details voice and tone and includes everything you need to know about your organization's position of these issues. And it also, you can divide it the way you want it to divide it, and the way you want to talk about it. So a very common way we like to do this messaging document is divided by platform. So because your message is different on Twitter versus Facebook or email, make sure that you are writing that down. So when you share internally or you have somebody else talking about the issue, it is really clear how it differentiates depending on the tool. And this is where I want to go back to persona mapping. Persona mapping is essential for like the messaging document and using the tools, because it helps you understand what audience is on which tool. And you can make this up. You can make up a random person that will care about your issue and then make up who they are, what type of tools they're on. And this helps really put a person behind your message and like who's receiving and personalizing your message. One thing I personally like to include in my messaging documents is, and it sounds silly, but it's making up a celebrity in your head that represents your tone and voice for this issue. So let's say Lester Holt from NBC is the best person to kind of people picture your message with, and not like because of like him, you don't want to picture him with it, but you want them to like eradicate his voice and tone when he speaks. That is something you would include in your messaging document so people understand and that is more specific on what specifically you want to talk about it. So preparing social media toolkits, infographics, and drafting emails is also part of the creatives. It is proven that if you post on social or send an email with a graphic, the engagement is higher. So here I'm showing an example of a GIF we made for one of our clients, and they were they had an advocacy week for COVID long haulers, and how do they get their message out there and make sure that people are paying attention. This is a very simple way of giving movement to a graphic that will go along with their tweet or their Facebook post and make sure people are stopping to read it. So you need to be creative. There's a lot of competition in the space, and you need to make sure that you can be as creative as you can, even when the topics are not as interesting or as easy to explain. So I want to show you some examples of ways that we've created materials before putting our message out there that have really helped. This is an MDP example. It is for North Carolina specifically. And what I like about this document is it starts with the national impact and really frames it into how it affects the constituent. So it starts with national impact. On the side, you can see their mission. You can see a description of what they're doing as an organization. And then you go into the numbers in North Carolina. And it even goes to have a list of cord blood banks and transplant centers. And then it ties to a constituent and how it directly impacted, how this organization directly helped this constituent. So this is a perfect example of how you should be giving your legislators or advocates the tools to understand the issue. So when a legislator is asked to talk about an issue and why they are for it or agree with it, they have everything they need here. And if they need more information, they know exactly where to go to. So this is another example, and this one particularly I want to talk about because it's more like a multimedia creation and how you can really stretch your materials. This is an infographic for NAMI. This was a campaign in 2020, and it had big, impactful stats that will convey a message. This is the infographic. This is actually one page of a 2-page infographic, and you can see it has the NAMI message, but it also has the stats. It has it in a very kind of attention-grabbing way, uses custom illustrations, and then it has the call to action at the bottom, learn more, you know where to get more information. So we took this infographic and actually created social media graphics for each of the stats. So that's what you see here on the top right side, more than half of US adults, and you can have this and share it, and you can make the graphics size specific to each of the platforms, which is really important so that you make sure people are reading it and all of that. And then last, we created and we made this infographic a 1.5 minute video with the same branding. And to go further, we actually took this video and when COVID hit, made it more specific to COVID. So there's so many ways in where you can take a literal infographic and create so much material from it. So make sure that you're leveraging that information and making sure that you're creating the materials to spread the message in not just one way, but different ways. So you're making sure you're capturing everybody. So does anybody have any questions on advocacy materials or way to amplify your message? Feel free to put them in the chat. Okay, I'll go into the ask, which is the advocacy action you need your advocates to complete. So your first message to your advocate should always include 3 main things: the organization and issue information. You need to put yourself in their shoes. We are often too in the weeds of the issue or mission of the organization. We don't realize the person reading it has really never heard of it or doesn't understand the issue. So make sure you're always including this, even when you're like, they're advocates that have been with you for years. It is important that you remind them. Talk about what you've done so far or what you hope to accomplish. This is very important so that they know that you do have an impact. And then lastly, invite them to learn more. Give them a low effort action, like signing up for a newsletter, so that you make sure that you're retaining them. This is an example from the YMCA. It is probably, just looking at it, it was a flyer that was, probably given out at an event to get people to sign up for more information. And you can also make this an email. You can also make this a post. Just make sure you're including those 3 key things. So, follow up. Now that you've introduced yourself, you're ready to be a little more specific. You always include a few sentences, as I was saying, recapping your mission and priority. But in your follow-up email or your second email to the advocate, you can be more candid, you can be more direct. One of the things that we always like in the second email is to include the call to action multiple times. So, and connect the issue with the person. I'm going to talk a little bit about this example that we have here. So, diabetes and COVID-19 vaccinations. What are you asking here? You're asking them to contact their governor to prioritize the distribution of vaccines for underlying conditions, but specifically diabetes. So you're sharing that information with them. You're giving them the first call to action. Then you're telling them that 5,000 people have already taken action. And then you're asking them to, again, take action. And you have their solution there. So that is a good example of a follow-up email. And being a little bit more aggressive, because this person obviously is interested in your issue if they're still here. Multiple ask. We often have the problem of having multiple legislative priorities at the same time, but we have one list. So how do we address this? One of the most common multiple different asks in 1 year for even health organizations is reauthorization versus appropriations. You need to get both support on both, but you have one list. So really, it's about prioritizing how you write that message out and how you explain it to them. We recognize that some issues are not as connected as others. So, and we still need to reach out to that list. So really prioritize your legislative ask depending on the moment. Educate your audience, your advocates, so they always know why an issue is important. And if you need multiple asks, then just break it down differently, give them different actions to complete that ask, and that will hopefully keep them engaged. Make sure that you use your grassroots data for this. This is kind of something that we talked about on 2 webinars ago, but that is why it's important to really segment and tag your advocates. When you have a big list and your big continues to grow, make sure that you're setting up for success. So when issues like this come up, you can simply segment the list and you know which advocates care about which issues to get that return on investment. So we are ready to deliver our message. What is critical to include in this message? First and foremost, this is very important, spark an emotion. Here you have an example from the American Cancer Society talking about a very big number that would scare anybody into taking action. But then after inciting fear, it keeps you accountable. It makes you feel like you are responsible for the outcome by saying, when you support American Cancer Society, you are making a difference in the world. So you see how they tied it to you, but at the same time incited fear with a big number. And again, this is a graphic that will stop anybody when I first encountered this graphic, what caught my attention was this GIF. This is a GIF, so the kind of text just fades into the graphic. It only lasts 3 seconds, but I read the stat there first, and then I stopped to read the message. And then you notice, but by that time, your audience has read the stat twice because you included it in your tweet too. So this takes us back to the importance of being creative with your message. Be clear and concise. As I said, don't expect people to understand your issues. Sometimes they are more complicated than we think. So make sure that you are making it as easy to understand as possible. Make it personal and educate. Make sure you're always educating. That's the way that you'll get them to take action. And then I want to talk a little bit about PSA versus PAS. These are two ways of putting your message out there. They are both very successful ways of crafting an advocacy message. So it's up to us to kind of understand where it works best. So to just explain the acronym here, PSA stands for Problem, Solution, and Action, and PAS stands for Problem, Action, Solution. So make sure that you include on any advocacy message you put out there, you should have the problem, the solution, and the action, or the problem, action, and solution, but always make sure you have stated the problem, have the solution, and have an action. So here are 5 things that you should include for problem, solution, action. I've seen a lot of success on emails, for example, or tweets. So you make sure that the person scheming your message is seeing the action at the end. But again, this goes back to make sure you have multiple asks within your message. So not multiple asks, but multiple chances to take action on your ask. So first, always engage your audience. Second, present the problem, explain the problem, be clear about the problem. Explain the why, and this is kind of like why we care, what would be the solution here. Connect the audience to the issue. Why should they care about it? And then make the ask, whether it's a sign up for sign this petition or send a letter to your legislator. Always have the ask. So, keeping your advocates informed. So, very important is that advocates are human beings. So they have jobs, they have family. We need to be as flexible as possible and understand that most of them are doing this because they care about the issue. So you need to make sure that you are being as you're including everybody in and being flexible with what the time that they have, but also the access they have. Make sure you're accommodating to your advocates who want to be heard, but don't necessarily have the access. Let's say one advocate doesn't have a computer or internet, and maybe they just want to call you up and share their story. Make sure you have the tools or the people to call that person and write their story down. And it's just a way to make sure that everybody feels heard and that you also get good stories for your materials. So year-round engagement is important because you don't always need a bill to reach out. Advocacy should be a year-round engagement. So you make sure that they feel part of the community. So retaining your advocates is really important. So you would say, what can I do when I don't have anything to ask from them or any active bill? One of the most common and easiest way, honestly, to get just an ask out there is to share your story. So I've included 2 examples here on how you can do that. But here it's really important to just tap into your community and learn more about like, why are they advocating? Why are they part of your list and why do they care? So again, your advocates are your most powerful tool. Make sure that they feel connected to your issue. Send legislative updates, monthly newsletters to keep them informed of your multiple priorities. So when you send your ask, make sure that you acknowledge that they're not looking at this issue like we are. So make sure if, for example, if the bill is going to the Senate and you are asking them to take action, make sure that you include in your email that the bill actually passed last week in the House, or like take that opportunity to educate them so that they understand the issue and they can advocate knowing. Keep in mind that not all of them have the same access and flexibility. We talked about this. Give them time. Don't expect, if you have a letter writing campaign, don't expect to get 100 letters all at once. We are all guilty of ignoring a text message or an email. This is why we need to send sometimes 2 or 3 emails and follow up. And then use this opportunity to identify what interests them within a topic. Sharing your story, for example, is the most common ask on a slow period, and it also gives you so much information about them, and it makes them feel heard and seen and like somebody's listening. Empower them. Again, their stories are the motor to your message, and I feel like I've said this 100 times, but it is important that we understand how big, how important our advocates are to our message. Make their stories the forefront of your message and materials. This gets you back to what we were talking about, sparking emotion. When you make it personal, when you have a story, it really sparks that emotion and people feel identified with it. So one of the other things you can do in slow periods is encourage your community to actually recruit other people. Retaining advocates is really important, but also making sure that they can expand to a broader audience. And how do we like get more people in slow periods is important. Like you could put up ads and get people to sign up, but are they really valuable advocates? Advocates brought in by other advocates are often very engaged because they care about the issue or they're affected by the issue. So you already have the credit of being a good organization, of actually incorporating your advocates into your message, and the advocate wants a family member or a friend that is impacted by this issue to join. That is one of the strongest candidates you can get for just retaining them in the future. Here we have an example of Beyond Type 1 and what they're doing kind of on a slow period, not asking for much, but they are highlighting positive quotes from their advocates. This gives them the opportunity to first have content to share on low periods, but also it allows them to empower the advocate. They feel, again, seen and heard, and they have the opportunity to share this post with their network or their audience within their platforms, which will lead to more people following your page or engaging with your legislative priorities. And then the last thing here, which is, which obviously is a little bit more developed when you already have a list, you have advocates, but creating that clear path from grassroots to grass tops is really important. We might just send random emails asking for a legislative ask, and you see advocates that are really involved on the different issues, but they want to do more. And you need to make sure that they are heard and that you can create that path for them to actually become just activated advocates. And the way to do that is actually creating a path for them to like, how do I move from just a simple email to actually joining calls or go and being invited to go into a legislator's office. And then I want to talk about, and I would love to hear examples of how you've done this within your organization. But some of the ways that we can actually shift from grassroots to grass tops is by recognizing the advocate, giving them access to insider information, and creating award programs. So you can see here, there's an award, which obviously is meant to be given at an event, kind of that is more to like, you know, give the advocate, but also show that you have little advocates doing things for you. It shows that it's a real person taking actions for you. But you can also do something as simple as a graphic with a photo of the advocate of the year or the month and just show them on social media. So recognizing these efforts, there's multiple ways of doing it. You can do a leaderboard, and some of the advocacy platforms actually have already set in place like leaderboards. You can also do social media highlights like we were talking about, just adding, thank you so much for the advocate of the month. You completed so many actions. And there's the traditional way of doing things, which is a goodie bag. And you can literally send that by mail. And yes, people still do it. You can have a tote bag with your organization's logo. You can have a mug or anything, and then a sticker. That's it. I promise you, they will be excited about it and they will feel part of your family and your organization. So for insider only information, some of the ideas that have been done successfully are the legislative updates. I was saying, like, it could be a biweekly email, it could be a newsletter, it could be a text, it could be anything. Just make sure you're tracking your legislative priorities and letting them know what's happening. If a bill moved from the House to the Senate, if a bill was introduced, they care about it. They're going to be they're going to be your most powerful tool to actually get this across the line. So make sure that they're educated enough that they can go on their own social media and tell this to their network. And then monthly ambassador calls is something that I've done in the past as well. And that's very simple. It doesn't take that much. It's mostly like you create an email or just talking points of how the bill is going or how your legislative priorities are going. You don't have to do them monthly, you can do them quarterly. And this has been specifically successful with like older audience that don't always know how to use email or text. And that way they just sign on to the call, you give them a report out. It can be 15 minutes, half an hour. They feel like they are ambassadors to your issue, and you get people to learn more and then advocate within their community. So, and we have a question here. So for text, so the question in the chat was, and I see it's directed to me, so I'll just read it out loud for everybody, is with the increase of spam calls and text, what are the pros and or cons of using text to connect with advocates? And also, is this something you recommend? We've had text campaigns in the past. It is obviously something that is more not time consuming, but it depends on what audience you are working on. I think it is a big investment as well. So I think it really go back to auditing your channels and your audience and making sure that text is the right move for you. Again, text will help you be more connected to your audience, but it might not be the right move for you. We can also divide it into do a text campaign with a specific list that you've segmented that is really engaged, rather than just sending text to, let's say you have 500,000 in your list, because it just depends on the return on investment there. But that, you know, one of my, you know, favorite tips or trick is make sure that you're using your, like, you have an audience, ask them what they want. So often if you have this question, one of the easiest way to tap into your audience is asking them, what do you want from us, right? So if you have social media channels, or if you have an email list, put up a poll or ask, are you guys interested in learning more through text? Is text something that you would, is text update something you would like from us? So always make sure that you're looking within your audience and understanding if it's worth the investment. And hopefully that cleared the question. If you had any other follow-ups, feel free to just send over. And while you are all thinking of your other questions, I want to talk about the power of thank you. So we often stop after we succeed in a legislative ask. We got what we wanted, it's done, and you celebrate it within your organization, and then you move on to the next legislative priority. It is as important, if not more important, to make sure that you are saying thank you. Appreciation goes a really long way. Thank you messages are important. I know at the end, you're just excited that your legislative priority, you know, check, you've done it for the year, you can report back, but make sure that everybody that was part of that success knows it. So one of the easiest way to do this, and you can prepare this before you actually have the bill pass or any small success, is creating a template to say thank you to legislators that were involved and even partner organizations, because they will help you spread your message for the next time. They will help you expand your audience by retweeting, liking, and they'll also feel accountable for it. If you're tagging a member of Congress on Twitter and they retweet it, they like it, or even if they just acknowledge it, it keeps them accountable. Hey, when I come back next year with this ask, or in 2 years when I need it to pass again, you're held accountable. You already told your constituents that you cared about this issue, and it just helps you create those like members of Congress that are your champions for an issue or supporters. So yes, we encourage posting on social media, tagging them so that they can see it. Not always are your supporters and champions in Congress following your page. So make sure you tag them so they can see it. When you're looking for a photo, or like, don't use an image as an excuse. Most of this post, you go into Google and you look for their congressional headshot and you just add it in, you can use it. And that's why most of the thank you posts use that image, and make sure that you obviously spell out the name correctly. Sometimes you can include the district or the state, that's fine. And then just make sure your advocates and legislators and supporters know, and they can even, like, partner organizations can even retweet it, which is helpful, I know. And then your advocates again are human beings. They probably care about the issue a lot if they are with you through multiple asks a year. So follow up with them, tell them about the direct impact that they're making on an issue. So you can send, one of our clients recently had an Advocacy Week event, and they had a really nice recap email, including something that you might think it's just internal information, but advocates would appreciate it, like how many impressions you got on social media, how many people actually tweeted about the issue or used the hashtag. And then it included information more like high-end information, like how many meetings they had and so on, how many supporters signed up to the bill. But make sure that you're letting them know how big they are to you and how important it is. So that is all I have for today. So any questions, comments, feel free to send, and I'm happy to answer.
Great. Natalia, a couple questions for you. One is we have our affiliate from Puerto Rico on the line. I know that is your home, and you're very, I'm always jealous when you're home when I see the palm trees and everything. How would you advise, you know, certainly tailoring that advocacy message with thoughtful cultural awareness, right? So what are some ways that you recommend from a professional perspective to ensure that folks are doing that in their campaigns?
Yeah, so I think that is very important. Michelle, thank you for bringing that up, because we often don't understand there's a cultural division, even within the, even within the states, territories. It is important that we acknowledge it. And that goes from just the way you type things, something as simple as if they have a holiday and you're sending out an email on that holiday, just acknowledge that. So it is really important that you do take the time to do your research. Sometimes it is hard because you are putting out an issue and sending it to people all over in 50 states. But make sure that you are still acknowledging also like the way you're writing your message. That's why it has to be clear and inclusive, simple. Something we like to do when we have like big campaigns on a state and a specific state is sometimes partner up with local organizations or other consultants that really know the culture well and understand how people care about it. Doing simple research when you're gearing up to a good campaign, going into that specific state or states and sending surveys or understanding what matters. It is often different what people care about within an issue versus others. So make sure you understand what cultural impact it has on your ask. And I would certainly say always educate yourself, always take the time to make sure your staff is educated. Again, you can include those types of things in your messaging document when you have an issue, like make sure you're acknowledging, let's say one of the states cares about an issue because of a specific thing that bothers one district. Make sure you include it there and be very literal on it. But definitely that is just something that you have to be, you have to continue to educate yourself because it also changes a lot. And you need to make sure that is forefront of your thoughts when you're drafting this.
Oh, thank you very much, Michelle, for asking. Here are the palm trees, but it is for us. It's been very positive also to be bilingual, as we our messaging, like in the LinkedIn and tweet, and it's been done on both languages. Mm-hmm. So we had seen that very positive because we receive feedback from many states where people are Spanish speaking. We get from all over the world, you know, down in South America in terms of our messaging, Spain, Europe. So that provides a significant outreach. And also with our legislators in the Hispanic caucus. So
yeah,
it's kind of, it provides kind of better attention from them. when we do the
Yeah.
bilingual messaging.
That's
Yeah.
great. That's great.
That's a great
Thanks for sharing
example.
that.
Yeah, that's a great example of how often we forget when we're advocating for an issue that is specifically targeting like communities, and you don't acknowledge that some of those communities maybe don't have a high education or speak another language. Make sure you're creating materials that are inclusive. So if that means you are talking about, for example, a very common issue, COVID-19 vaccines, make sure you have materials in multiple languages and address the fact that you have multiple communities within the United States that don't always understand English as well.
Perfect.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you. So a couple of other things. I don't know if they're, I know Michelle Guadalupe was on the line, but I think she may have stepped off. Ben Chandhook, who joined BIO from an advocacy group, or Diane, anybody from one of the patient groups want to talk about how you thank your advocates? Going back to the last couple of slides, I think it's always exciting to hear how different patient groups, communities sort of really make sure they reach back and thank their ambassadors and represent their folks that have given the time to participate.
So this is Ben, and as Michelle mentioned, I used to work at the Arthritis Foundation, and we recognized our advocates in a number of different ways, but we certainly had like a certain levels of involved, from grassroots to grass tops. And then of the grass tops, we gave awards every year. Some of them have now, I think, sprouted offshoots in that they've been named after staff or advocates, named after and recognizing dedication of service and otherwise. We certainly would recognize them on calls and at the end of the year type celebrations. We had a fly into DC pre-pandemic, and we would often recognize them there at our annual meetings as well. We used to give out ribbons as well, and they absolutely love them. So those those were ideas that came from the volunteers and advocates themselves. And I think that's another way to sort of find what works best for your community in terms of recognition. Is we have at the Arthritis Foundation, we had a number of different committees involved, whether it was like sorting through policy or planning that DC fly-in, and a lot of these recognition ideas came out of those committees from the volunteers themselves.
So yeah, this is Diane.
Yeah, Diane, thank you.
Yeah, Lupus Research Alliance. So similarly, we had an idea come out of our advocates, and so when we were able to be in person on the Hill, to actually, so we don't do like a kind of a formal recognition, but take those seasoned advocates and make them team leads and pair them up with the more novice groups. And it sort of recognizes, their experience and gives them an opportunity to have kind of a leadership role in that, or have them like speak at the advocacy meetings and be panelists and such. So, and give them recognition in that way to make it very impactful. And on the thank yous, I threw a note into the chat to Natalia. Like, one of the things that we found is that, sending thank you notes not only to the members, but also to like their staff who work hard with you to get these things done. Like, we once had a staff person say they've never been thanked for working with an advocacy group before. And it really goes a long way in helping to engage those relationships. And, the staffers move around at everything a lot too. But, often you find then they move from one office to another, and investing in that engagement with the staffers, I think is important as well. So, and this was great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's Ben will laugh at this, but I have gone to so many Arthritis Foundation Hill days. I still have the blue shirt that says I am the face of arthritis, and I still have my stuff from when you were LRI, Diane, from being in your Hill days 10 years ago. So all of those things are really very cool. Sorry, Yvonne, you were going to speak up again.
Yeah, I was going to mention that one of the things that we have been doing more recently with the COVID is being to identify, and this part of that persona mapping is identifying common influencers, not just the artists or the high-level people, but common people that we can identify within a region that have a decent number of followers, and then talk to them and convince them to also be part of our spokespersons. So that's very successful, because now you're getting into the common people talking to their peers, which is very effective.
Other comments or questions that anyone wants to share or experiences? Okay, great. Well, Barrett, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I know we only have a few moments left, but I had a quick question for Natalia around measuring the success of these tools in your messaging.
Yeah, so metrics are different for each platform. Honestly, the best way to measure success to your message is just by knowing which message performed well. It is very common to use, so as you develop your precise message, use just test your messages out there and see which one performs best. Message testing is really important, just to know how your audience reacts to each message. Again, going back to sparking an emotion, check what emotion really makes a difference. And the best way to do that is just to create a set of different ways that you can message this and then test them out. And that goes back to survey and analysis before even starting to put your message out there. Testing this out with people within that district or within that state before you start putting it out there. It is an investment, but it is the most accurate way to kind of measure the success of your message. And then after your message, then each platform has its own metrics, and you can, that's when you start with engagement versus impressions and things like that. But that's a little more in depth and depending on which platform.
We've also had a biotechnical conversation about measurement and, emails that click and how to make sure you're capturing all of those open rates. And so I'll make sure that we follow up and send you a link to our video archive where that's really explored at depth. So I will let Barrett have the last word, just a quick reminder, and then she will close. So I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. So first thing, I'm sending a survey in the chat. So we are hoping to get feedback on past webinars and some ideas for future topics. So we will send that out via email, but it's also in the chat. And then also a reminder, our June biotechnical webinar will be canceled because of BioDigital. And finally, I just want to, in the spirit of saying thank you, I want to thank Natalia for your time today and teaching us so much. And with that, we will close out and you'll see an email from us soon. Thank you, everyone.